Hey everybody, Brian Fonseca here to tell you about the multi-time award-winning series out now that is Side Hustle, which is created, executive produced, hosted, and edited by me, Brian Fonseca. Side Hustle is a sit-down interview series that taps into sacrifice, the odd avenues taken to progress closer to your ultimate dreams, and some jokes as well. Because we always gotta find it funny, and we always gotta find time to laugh. Side Hustle has been named to the best TV and web series category at several different film festivals, including the 2020 International New York Film Festival, the New York Movie Awards, and a host of others. Be sure to watch season 1 in full right now on either brianfonseca.net or youtube.com/brianfonseca. Brian with a Y, remember. All 8 episodes, trailers, teasers, and promo are free to watch, and the series as a whole is approximately 2 hours long. Everyone has a story, everyone has a side hustle. Be sure to watch season 1, out now.
Ain't Hard to Tell podcast, episode 163. Dexter Henry, Brian Fonseca, we back. We're here.
Yeah.
Continuing to do the thing. Brian, how you doing, man?
Doing all right. I have Hitman 3 at my disposal. I'm already yoking people up in Dubai. You already know. We get Agent 47. We back, and because of you, I'm also playing The Last of Us 2.
Yeah, yo,
and,
love the background behind you. Love the background behind you.
Yeah, so this is where I'm up to. So any listener of this pod, do not send me any spoilers. I'm thoroughly enjoying the story. I just started day 2 in Seattle, and Ellie's revisited her 16th, I think it was her 16th birthday with Joel, since it was 3 years prior.
Yep.
To the events that are currently or have taken place, I guess. Storytelling is very, very good. I'm very, very impressed, and also very on edge so far to what's going on. And in Hitman 3 also, there's some stuff that you see in the opening cinematic. I only finished the first mission. Like, look, man, I gotta play something stupid like I Am Bread. You ever seen I Am Bread?
I have. You need you need something where you're not thinking, it's just silly.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
After I finish these games, but like that's why sometimes I'll throw in NBA 2K, I'll throw in UFC, I'll throw in some Yu-Gi-Oh just to lighten it up, listen to some podcasts or whatever. Because that's the thing too. I listen to podcasts when I play video games, except if it's a story-based game like Hitman or like The Last of Us 2. Because you can't listen to a podcast and play The Last of Us. Are you stupid? So yeah.
No, when I was playing that game back in this last summer, man, all my focus was in on that. You can't be doing anything else in that. I know how serious it is. But no, I've been good, taking time this month, watching a lot of basketball, a lot of NBA action going on. And we're at this interesting time with the NBA, right? Because we're starting to get to that 17, 18 game mark in terms of games played. The Knicks are around 500. Some teams have gotten off to really good starts. The Lakers and Clippers look good. The Jazz look good. What do you make of this NBA season early on? It's been a tough season because of all the postponement of games. Just so many that's made it hard for DFS, fantasy players, people who bet and gamble. We talked about this on the Picks and Prop show. It's hard this season because there's so much going on.
Yeah, and obviously, more importantly, it's just hard on the players, the teams, staff, the coaches, the um, women who want to be involved with the players, and otherwise, like, it's just a difficult time for everybody. Like, you're flying from city to city, and you can't do the normal things that you would normally do.
Yeah.
As an NBA player, you can't really enjoy the fruits of being an NBA player, which obviously has to suck beyond the fact that every 2 weeks you're getting a very nice paycheck in some cases, or in many cases. But like, it's just tough because it's really tough to assess teams. Like, for example, I still very much like 6 teams in the Eastern Conference. 6 teams that I like in terms of I can see them getting to at least the Eastern Conference Finals. There are a couple of them where I'm iffy on like whether they can get beyond that, but that's still saying a lot just in terms of what we expect from these teams, or what I expect from all 6 of them. It's like, to me, Milwaukee's a contender. Boston's obviously a contender, and Boston's been a little difficult to assess because of COVID to Jason Tatum, and because Kemba Walker, who just got back from an injury, had been injured, and also like Jalen Brown was out because of COVID protocol at one point, and their lineup is all over the place. Miami, who I obviously still like as a potential contender, Jimmy
Obviously.
Butler's Jimmy Butler's played like 4 games this year, and Jimmy Butler has I think he actually has COVID and he's in the protocol. Him and Avery Bradley, they've been out. I don't know if one of them or both of them or whatever the case may be, but they've been out for a long period of time. There was at one point where Miami only had 8 healthy players that they were trotting out there and nearly beat the Sixers if it wasn't for a missed carry call by the official on Joel Embiid. But like they were starting Gabe Vincent at one point, who was a two-way last year.
Right.
The Philadelphia 76ers, it's another team I like that's a contender. They had some COVID stuff, but now they're mostly back. The Indiana Pacers, I like them. Like I think they're a sneaky team who can get to the Eastern Conference Finals if things click. Like they're at the bottom of this group, but things have to click in the right direction. And we haven't seen Karis LeVert yet with his new team because he gets traded, and then we discover that there's a mass on his kidney.
Which we
You know
hope,
what I mean?
which we hope, is everything's okay with that, and
Yeah.
that's definitely a concern for him with that. But you're right, the Eastern Conference, a lot of good teams, some surprise teams. You could say the Cavs, over 500. The Knicks,
Sex land.
the sex land giving the love. We like that. The Hawks, not really surprised. Most people had them competing for the last couple of spots. The Knicks have been really solid in terms of how they're playing, just around 500 as well too, playing hard. A couple days ago, best team, best overall defensive rating. So it's been a very interesting season, and it's been tough. The Raptors now starting to climb back up after a very rough start. They're starting to be what they are. So
I'm still skeptical of them though. I'm still skeptical.
I think you should be skeptical of a lot of teams with the start. It's still a little too early to say this is a trend or this isn't a trend. I think we got to hit that 25 game mark. So I feel like in about 9 to 10 games or so, we should 8, 9 games say we should really know that there. I think certain teams, you know how good they are. I think we know how good the Lakers are. I think we know how good the Clippers are. The Jazz are very interesting. They're off to a start with 8 games over 500. It's going to be intriguing to see if they can keep that up going forward. Some teams started off shaky, like the Nuggets, although I still think they're shaky. I'm not sure I believe in them that much because the inconsistency of your boy, Jamal Murray. The Blazers, really bad defensively. You see a lot. There's a lot of teams jumbled. A lot of teams haven't really separated themselves. The Sixers are the best team in the East. They've got a 2-game lead. The Lakers and Clippers are tied atop the West, and they have a half-game lead over the Jazz at the time we're recording this. So nobody's really separating themselves, and a lot of that has to do with just the COVID situation, the way it's been with the league. Guys don't know who's on the team one night, who they're playing, will these games be played? Some teams have had a week's worth of games postponed. So it's just been crazy in the NBA to watch, and I feel like the next time we talk, the next time we record a podcast, we might be talking a little bit differently and seeing some teams that have separated themselves and how it's going. But early on, I know we'll talk about this before we move on and then bringing out guests. I know a player that you've liked early on for MVP. We talked about this on the NBA Picks and Prop show. Joel Embiid has been balling out of his mind. He's been fantastic, man.
This is the most impressed with him I've probably been like throughout his career. And I don't know who to credit between Doc Rivers, him, Daryl Morey, all of the above, but I feel like there's a shift in focus and like, we have to not force feed him, but we need to play around Joel Embiid. Now in turn, that'll inevitably bring up, whether or not like Ben Simmons gets traded down the line. I don't think it'll happen this season. I feel like it's safe to say that Ben Simmons will last the season with the Sixers, but I think that things will turn. He'll probably get moved at some point in the off season, and then we'll really see this thing go toward Joel Embiid. And another thing I wanted to mention as far as the NBA goes in the Western Conference, like it's not necessarily COVID, but the Portland Trailblazers, who I was very high on coming into the season, snake bitten with injuries. Yusuf Nurkic, who wasn't playing well to begin with, who was actually being outplayed by Enes Kanter before he got hurt, is now seriously injured and is going to be out for, I think from the time we're recording this, probably 6 to 8 more weeks. Zach Collins has been out again, and he's somebody who's just snake bitten with injuries. And, all of a sudden they're thin, like in the front lines, so we'll see. Like, I think because of the COVID situation, I would probably even argue that it may not even go to the 25 game mark. Like I might need half the season to really assess like what's going on, just
That's
because,
fair. That's
yeah,
fair.
just because, especially with a team like Portland, with a team like Miami, with damn near every team. Like surprisingly, the Lakers and Clippers haven't really dealt with COVID in this same way. Like
Hmm.
some teams have just been luckier in this regard. The Knicks haven't even had an outbreak or anything like that, like during it, which has helped them because they've been able to get off to this encouraging start that leads me to believe, like, oh, they can get one of these 7 to 10 spots, probably 9 or 10, and get into play in, which is a great sign, a great trend moving forward
Hmm.
with the coach who I think is going to get the most out of these guys. So, we'll see. It's a little too early to really be, plant your flag and be definitive on certain things. So I'm still skeptical of a lot of what we're seeing, and hopefully we get vaccinations throughout the country. That's the bottom line, and just keep everyone as safe as we could now that we have a new administration, which we'll talk about later in this podcast a little bit.
Absolutely. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the teams talk about the Knicks, the Nets, the California teams, some of the states where there's some stricter COVID protocols that these teams necessarily have seemed a little bit healthier in terms of
Good
COVID.
point.
So, I think that's something to keep an eye on throughout the season. We'll talk more about that coming up.
Backpack Broadcasting continues to bring you the best original sports content, but now you can get more of the content you love. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus content, including behind-the-scenes footage and interviews from the Sports Walk, Sideline Stories, or the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. All this exclusive content comes via Patreon. There are tiered levels of patronage, and each Backpack Broadcasting patron receives exclusive perks. Your support helps Backpack Broadcasting create more of the original content that you love. Visit Backpack Broadcasting's Patreon page and become a patron today.
All right, we got a guest today. It's a guy I've wanted on this podcast for quite some time. My man Bradford Davis. He is the columnist at the New York Daily News and also one of the hosts on the Five and Dive Baseball Prospectus. Can't talk today. Podcast. Brad, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm living, man. I mean, figuratively, literally. I'm here, man. Had a it was a whirlwind of a week, in sports and baseball especially.
Yeah.
Grateful to be able to be part of the game. So
Absolutely, man. And because of the whirlwind of a week in sports, baseball in particular, we wanted to bring you on. Obviously, we'll start off with the fact that Hank Aaron, the legendary Hank Aaron, passed away earlier this week. And, that touched the baseball community. I think it touched the baseball community. It touched the black community. Absolutely, for sure. And you wrote a piece on the Daily News about Hank and his impact. Could you just talk a little bit about what it was like to, as a baseball fan and writer, just be able to write about such a legendary figure?
yeah, I mean, of course, it hit me like a ton of bricks just to hear that he had died. I mean, because you know, I knew obviously he's up there in age, but just a few weeks ago he was out here like getting vaccinated and everything, like just kind of just still being a very public facing figure, and by the way, I should preface by saying I in no way make a connection to the vaccine
Right.
to Hank Aaron. Instead, please everybody listening, get your shots as soon as
Yeah,
possible.
that's an important disclaimer.
So that's an important disclaimer. There is no evidence that that's the truth. The man was 86 years old. So all right, let's dead that. But anyway,
Yes.
so I was sad, of course, that hear he passed. But I really didn't know what to say, what to add to. I'm not a baseball historian. I don't know Hank Aaron from experientially. I wasn't around in the 50s and 60s. Watching him play. And there are other writers and journalists who've done profound work on him. Howard Bryant, to me, being the first name that anyone should be thinking about when they think about people who documented Hank Aaron's life
Yes.
over the last 10 years, 10-15 years. But as I was just kind of soaking up Hank. And one of the things I noticed was that there became a sort of a mode of discourse about him that was frustrating me. Um, and one that focused on what was described as, I guess, is his, stoicism, his um I guess just that he was, someone who over, who dealt with um the racial abuse that he had suffered without lashing out. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was sort of the kind of language and description in many of these early obits and reflections from a lot of people within sports media and the sports world at large. And that frustrated me because it reminded me of just kind of what happened, what happens every I guess second or third Monday of the year with Jackie
Yes.
Robinson Day.
Yes.
I mean, not Jackie Robinson
Martin
Day.
Luther King. Martin Luther King
Martin
Day.
King Day.
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
But also Jackie
But
Robinson.
it happens with Jackie Robinson too, right? Yeah.
But yeah, in that complicated figures are only remembered for the times where they showed what was a perceived docility rather than um the fire or the conviction that they had. Their full range of emotions are collapsed into being meek and timid and kind. Not to say there's anything wrong with any of those traits, but when often when describing black people, especially after they're gone, when they can't speak for themselves, are used as a way of favoring certain ways of responding to racism. That don't appear to disrupt the actual act or structural racism itself. And so that really, and that bothered me. And so, seeing that happen, every year, every second, whatever day Martin King Day falls on, and also Jackie Robinson as well. Like, I'm like, man, I just don't want this to happen to Hank. And so and that's kind of what provoked me to decide to throw my hat in, because I really did not want to write about it. I just wanted to read about him, and then but then that kind of pushed me in.
What was the response? Because on Twitter, I always watch. You get a lot of interaction from people around baseball, especially when we've spoken about this, Brad. Especially when it connects with topics of race, right? And what was the reaction from people about that? Would you sort of pushing back on that notion that, hey, Hank's more than this. He's not just this figure that kind of was like, oh well, it's bad, but I trudged along through the racism.
Yeah, I'm honestly really grateful that the reception was overwhelmingly positive. You know, I'm slow to use the P word progress. Given again we just saw like a freaking insurrection in the Capitol like 2 weeks ago. So
Yeah.
I don't want to jinx it and start a civil war, right? But like, but I could say I'm grateful that people were receptive to I thought was a pretty kind of sharp take. As far as just kind of being very confrontational about the way a lot of people I think were had been thinking about Hank and what I wanted to possibly correct. So I mean, yeah, people, I think among folks who either have articulated this same issue before or felt it in their heart but never put the words in. Um, there was a lot of I think appreciation for just someone putting it out there. And then among a lot of frankly white folks who just who were not you know um aware of how even compliments can be condescending,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
like there were people who had thanked me either over Twitter or IG or or email, whatever, just kind of for enlightening them and perhaps changing their mind. That's what you hope to do, I guess, when you write an argument, is that you give a voice to people who didn't have one, and you change the minds of the people who do. So
What?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
You know what's funny? Like hearing you say this, and the point that you mentioned before in terms of like what people lean on when discussing certain figures when they die. Same kind of thing happens to, and as a Puerto Rican, I know this. Same kind of thing happens to Roberto Clemente, where they talk about like how nice he was, how generous he was, and nobody talks about like he kind of led a protest to stop games on opening day in like 1968, and had there were games that were canceled, and there were reasons for that. You know what I mean? Like there were great reasons for that, like things that would be commendable today for a certain section of people, and things that other people would just choose to ignore, as we've seen historically. I think this interesting that there are parallels between Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, who's not just Puerto Rican but an Afro Latino. He's black, and then Hank Aaron, who we obviously have talked about a lot this week. So that's sort of a parallel that I made. And in a sport like baseball, it also doesn't surprise me that narratives could be changed and shifted in this way, because we know of, like, Bradford, you're sort of a unicorn in this baseball media space for reasons that are obvious. You know what I mean? And that's sort of how, like, history is told by, the majority of people who are white. It's kind of what it is.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think Clemente is a fantastic, parallel as a Black Puerto Rican man. Like, he was also frequently, respected when he was quiet, mocked when he spoke, and that's on the very literal way he spoke, because he was still learning the English language, as someone from the island who came, to the continental U.S. But then also, of course, when he had actual ideas about how the world should work, he was a passionate advocate for Black civil rights in the U.S., as well as empowering the Latin diaspora as well. He and so but Clemente, a lot of that is unfortunately really lost, as well in the sort of common discourse about the man, because of course to actually appreciate him for all he was would disrupt things in a way that would make the game look a lot different than it is right now. So of course there is a narrative that will always be advanced, and so what I hope is that in as reporters, as journalists, as writers, like we can with audiences, with voices, like to be able to offer a better, truer narrative that actually helps us appreciate these men more. That's something I really hope people understand, is that, like, when you flatten out these guys, when you make them so 2D, like, you actually minimize their accomplishments. What they did, to hit 715 with everything he was going through, and he was not, he didn't just brush it off. He was angered and grieved and sad and scared. He was not like, what I mean? He was not Teflon. Like, you prick us, we bleed. Like, and so for him to still do that, like that, that heightens the, what he did. Doesn't diminish it, So like we gotta keep the texture, man. Like, that's the only way to really learn what happened and apply it to our lives today.
And thank you for saying that, Brad, because you actually said that, which is kind of the point you were making, that a lot of people skated around this on Hank Aaron and saying that he wasn't angry. He went through this without being angered. And it's like, no, to be Black in America is being in a constant state of rage, to quote the great James Baldwin. So to act as though he wasn't angry through his experiences is completely disingenuous and just absolutely not true. Now, another thing I wanted to touch upon with Hank, there's kind of been this narrative that I've seen in reading pieces and throughout the media, is to highlight Hank Aaron's accomplishments. We're also now trying to tear down Barry Bonds. No matter what it is that you might feel about Barry Bonds, I see your reaction, Brad. But it's sort of bothered me, right? Like, you don't have to do this to Barry Bonds. We know. Let me just be clear about a couple of things. And Brad, you know this because you're a big baseball guy. You know this too, Brian. Barry Bonds was not friendly with the media. All right, this has been known and well documented. We get this, but the things I've seen this week of people tearing down Bonds would never be what Hank Aaron is. He can't be. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Am I bugging on this? I don't think I am, based on your reaction, Brad. But how do you feel about that? Because there have been some media members that have done this.
So this obviously is audio. So just so you know, my reaction was immediately face palming myself over and over again as Dex was talking.
With 2 hands.
Yes. Nah, man. Yes, infuriating. Like, and it's sort of the I think it runs adjacent to to what I was hoping to convey with the this Hank Aaron column. But yes, man, like, leave Barry alone. Like, it's his hero died like a few hours ago, and that's the opportunity to be like, oh yeah, this is why he can never be that bad, because of the very likely steroid use, and because he was rude, right? And the thing that's so frustrating about me is people don't realize how ahistorical they are, or really much how much they fit in the lineage of media, usually white media, but media like not accepting black people unless they're entirely differential to their voices and into their columns, their blogs, their takes. And so that happened to it happened to Hank Aaron. When he married his second wife, and was also starting to become a little just a little more testy and a little more vocal about things that bothered him. Which happened to intersect with him marrying this woman who's Billy, who was actually very involved in the civil rights movement.
Yes.
Even before marrying Hank, right? And so the immediate narrative was, is Billy Aaron a problem? Is did she this proud black woman.
Did she radicalize him?
Tainting, this humble baseball player. So that was a real problem that Hank dealt with. Now, granted, Barry Bonds has not been out there on important political issues, and I'm not even saying Barry Bonds is a particularly good person. In fact, there are legitimate issues with which I think the media ought to discuss a lot more with him, especially the fact that he's had multiple allegations of domestic violence with his intimate partners.
Yes,
like that's like a part of his record that is like exponentially like diminished relative to the steroid use. When people talk about character with Barry Bonds, it's always the shot in the butt and the and him being like mean to some like kid asking for an autograph. But it's never that he allegedly beat women, right? Which so just using process of elimination, knowing how writers talk about black athletes and black public figures in general, knowing that how they don't talk about the actual valid concerns about Barry Bonds a person. I'm just like, okay, process of elimination, this is racist.
Word.
And so I think it's absolutely abhorrent. I even got into it recently with a writer who had basically done that take, but without mentioning at all the DV stuff, like DV being again domestic violence. So I mean, I'm with you on that, man, and it really needs to end. You should not be pitting these two people against each other. And and just that last little nugget too. PEDs existed before 1989. You know what I'm saying? Like they existed. Barry Bonds did not invent them. There are players who said that steroid use was happening in the 60s. Plus there's of course amphetamines that were used without prescription in order so that you can have a fun night while snapping back at 11 o'clock in the morning to take your batting practice or whatever. I mean, like that was happening back in like the 60s. So there is and I far from me to accuse Aaron or anyone of any sort of drug use, but just know that it was happening, and that this is not a clean era versus a dirty era,
Yeah,
it's just an era.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you guys agree with me on that. I think the stuff against Bonds, absolutely, it's just we don't have to go there and do that. But like you said, it's not a good look, and it makes you think about the way certain athletes, black athletes in particular, are portrayed and written by certain members of the media.
They're doing it right now with the quarterbacks in the NFL. Every time Lamar Jackson loses a playoff game, he gets compared to, Patrick Mahomes. Oh, Patrick Mahomes, they have to tear one of them down. Russell Wilson, like that. There's a process of elimination going on there as well. And look, we're recording this Sunday night during the AFC Championship game. If Josh Allen wins, right? If Josh Allen wins, and I hope he doesn't, and I don't think he will, but if he and the Bills win, watch what people are going to say in comparing him to Lamar Jackson, which has probably already started because Lamar Jackson had to go to the AFC Championship, which, football is its own thing because, like, you could only impact the game with so much as an individual player. But that's a nuanced discussion for another podcast.
We see it with Aaron Rodgers. He didn't make it. He's like the greatest quarterback since the moment he took that starting job. Like, he's been the best, like the only successor is probably Pat Mahomes. And yet, he has won one NFC Championship game. He's made the Super Bowl once, and he won it, right? So, come on, like, relax.
I kind of wish now that we're like not to just sort of hijack this.
No, it's fine.
I kind of wish Patrick Mahomes made people a little more uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I kind of wish he leaned into his blackness a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Like instead
of like one do-rag,
like instead of just doing it on the commercial.
You know what I mean? Like, do not even just do rag. Do it with the tie in the corner right here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wish Patrick Mahomes would just kind of like lean into that a little bit more because I think there's a real opportunity there for a much larger conversation, especially as someone who's biracial. But you know, and we'll see. Hopefully, he wins another Super Bowl though, because I don't want to see Tom Brady win that shit again.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are out on that. All right, you talked. There's some other news that was going on. Busy week for you, Bradford. We're going to talk a little about what went down with the New York Mets and their now former GM Jared Porter. Obviously, reporting done by Mina Kimes and Jeff Passan. That was just really disgusting stuff surrounding Jared Porter and how he, you can say it's not really alleged now because it's been out there and there's evidence, but sexual harassment of a former female baseball writer from another country, and we'll get into how that got really messy too. When this broke, Brad, were you? I don't think shocked is a word for any of us as men who've worked in sports media. Were you as disgusted as I was? Because this was just ridiculous. The first thing that came to my mind, Brad, was how did the Mets not catch this or vet this? But I've always had this thought that if you want to catch this stuff and you want to look for this stuff, then you have to have the want to look for it. And I'm not necessarily sure that they or any other organization really has cared about finding out this stuff before.
Yeah, man. I mean, I was like, I was sad and disappointed, angered, but not terribly surprised because I know how sadly, outside of the XY chromosomes, and I know how we do, unfortunately, and we, and just to preface again, like, we need to be, leading within our text groups and our group chats and our, in our hangouts to make sure that we keep each other accountable on this stuff. We should not be allowing anything on the predatory spectrum to exist. Among our friends groups that people know how to treat. If they didn't hear from their mom or dad, like hear from us. Like this is not how we talk to women, talk to people you're interested in. But anyway,
sorry to cut you off 1 second. I just wanted to mention to people just the gravity of this. That this GM was sent an unwanted photo of his genitalia to this woman reporter. This happened back in 2016, and then continuously sent messages. This woman after she said she was uncomfortable with it, so he clearly didn't get the hint. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was understood to our listeners.
And also, you can't be surprised because there's usually a certain type of dude who this kind of happens to, but that's, we can get more into that after Bradford takes the serious part of this discussion because I'm going to steer this in a totally irresponsible direction.
Yeah, but yeah, man. Go ahead, Bradford. Sorry, man.
No, it's all good, man. So that plus like 60 unanswered text messages at one point, where with most of them flirtatious, with him like peddling like information at times that I forget the sequence exactly, about like because he was hitting on a reporter via text.
Strike one.
Yeah. Also, yeah, come on. So that's part of the problem too, right? But she was clearly not feeling him, given that she did not respond to any of his texts. And so then he finally went there with with these lewd selfies of like like literally an erect penis at one point, right? So yeah, so I was furious about that. It's not, I shouldn't say, it's, I wrote from the perspective of the Mets, given that, I'm with the New York Daily News, so the hometown paper and everything. And I was at the press conference, as they kind of wrapped up and explained kind of what happened and what they're, and how they're trying to move forward. But like, it does not fall entirely in the Mets. It is a, certainly the Cubs should be like heavily interrogated about this.
Fair. That's fair. Yep.
Every team, they're, the Red Sox, who has more experience with the Red Sox than anyone else.
Yep.
The Diamondbacks, which he also served as an AGM before he came to the Mets, like everyone, deserves some smoke, Major League Baseball as a whole. And frankly, most sort of like, corporate institutions, like, these are things that happen, outside of, baseball or sports, you know what I mean? So like, so this is not just the Mets problem, right? Just to be entirely clear, I don't want to do the orange and blue version of like, or the Mets version of like Knicks for clicks, like it's, but with that said, right? And that, meaning that for those who aren't aware, like whenever something bad happens to Knicks, like, it's aha Knicks. That's not
Right.
my heart spirit at all. But that being said, the Mets team president, a very respected man named Sandy Alderson, who's been around the league, been around for forever, and does not seem to be, though I can't say I know him, personally, anything like that, like a bad and nefarious person. However, he made some critical errors, during this press
Yes, he did.
One is that he gave away a key detail about this woman that was clearly supposed to be, something she kept confidential, so that and the ESPN story didn't mention this detail either. Probably could have been written a little more carefully, but they didn't mention it because she said that she feared retribution.
Yeah.
If she was, if this was the if it was to get out who exactly she was, right? But then but that's like, horrible. Like he just gave it up. Like, and I'm like, I was so angry, with that. Now again, I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it has to be intentional. But the impact could already be done.
Right.
The second thing was that is that someone asked him. It was Hannah Kaiser of Yahoo Sports, right?
Yep.
But Hannah asked, like, Sandy Alderson, like, yo, did you ask any woman, like, while you were vetting this person?
Which is a great question.
And a great question. His answer was no. And now I appreciate that he was honest about it, right? It was good that he was honest because given that these are like back channel conversations, it would have been pretty easy to lie, given that, these are supposed to be private discussions, but he didn't. He told the truth. He's like, no. However, what he said after that, was also, bothersome, when explaining, the rationale is that there weren't enough high ranking women in baseball with which to do a good assessment on him on that level. And that is like, that to me, like, I think you just have to reject entirely. Like, first of all, it's true. He was trying to, present some truth about the structural injustices within baseball, and probably, true of all American pro sports, right? And that women aren't usually at the, at the higher levels, and that is a problem, right? But not in Jared Porter's case. Jared Porter was hired as an intern in 2004 with the Red Sox. Working alongside him and at times above him was Raquel Ferreira, a black woman, who is now the assistant general manager of the Red Sox.
Yep.
Who was even the interim GM at one point during the 2019 season after their GM had gotten fired. Has worked on contract extension, contract negotiations with her, her own players. She had 11 years of overlapping time, and so if you're taking his word at heart, like, that means that he never asked, like, this, like, literally pioneering woman,
right?
So spent 11 years with him, There is, like, he could have, man, there's so many things, so many opportunities he could have taken, Alderson could have taken to, widen the playing field, Maybe you don't just need to have, like, a woman who's also a boss, talking to him, because clearly he's not necessarily preying on his bosses,
Right.
But he was preying on the vulnerable reporter from a different country.
Like, I think it's hard. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it's hard for people to believe that there isn't some kind of trail here, Bradford, right? That there isn't other women that this happened to. I do not think that this woman that was in the story is the first woman. But as we know, women are afraid to speak on this. And one of the things I saw that I think you probably saw too that was disgusting around this week was that people were countering men. Let's call it for what it is. Men were countering, well, why didn't she come out with this before? Why did she wait until this time?
Because of fools like you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because people will always have a reason to doubt why you say what you like. If she did it a week later, why didn't you come immediately? Like, if she did it 12 seconds afterwards, like,
Yeah.
Right.
why you lying then? Then there is never a acceptable criteria for a certain kind of person about whether or not about why someone did or did not do their due diligence in reporting the crime committed against them. Come on, man. Like,
to that point, your colleague and Mets beat reporter Disha Thozar wrote a fantastic piece, and salute to her, in which she talked about her own experiences with sexual harassment working in no place, a place that I used to work at, MLB, Advanced Media, and the stuff that she had to go through there, just absolutely disgusting. But that is exactly why women sometimes do not come with this in a quick fashion. And it's because of people who create this culture around it. And it's just this disgusting. I guess the last thing before we let you get out of here, Bradford, is, and one other thing I thought that from you, that which is one of the reasons we want to hear, you talked to a Mets player who was clearly disgusted about what was going on. It was good to hear that from a player in the organization, that he was disgusted about what was going on. When you hear players have the responses like that, do you think that this is a sort of not watershed moment just for the Mets, but also baseball as a whole in looking at really changing the culture? I think we as men who do the right thing know that this is bad, but do you think this is a shift for baseball going forward in sort of really cleaning up this kind of mess that exists?
It could be.
Yeah, word.
I know that's a non-committal answer.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine to be unsure about things.
I'll tell you why it's non-committal, right? Because the Mets are also believed to be sort of the leading pursuance of Trevor Bauer, who's just won the Cy Young Award, a fantastic pitcher last year, and a good one before that, but also one who has not sexually harassed, but has a good track record of harassing women who don't like him for a lot of reasons, partially because of his politics. He's very avid. Has been a very avid Trump supporter, has complained about quote unquote illegal immigrants, undocumented, folks. He has shared anti-Semitic conspiracies from his Twitter handle, So what the dynamic, just for people who are unaware, is that he says some stupid stuff, right? Some, a woman on the internet, a lot of people on the internet call him out for it, but it seems anecdotally, at least, that when women do, he gets riled up and he starts, piling on that person. And because he has developed such a following, because he posts so often about everything, he's just constantly tweeting God. But when is that he has this rabid fan base of people who will defend him to death, So all these simps come out and they start, and so the moment he draws attention to some woman who has like 1/80th of his following, he doesn't even have to say violate the terms of the standards or the TOS of any of the social media platforms he's on, Twitter, mostly, because his fans will do it for him. And so they go after, they make horrible jokes, whether on the woman's appearance, threats, jokes about race or identity or ethnicity, religion, whatever. And he does nothing to calm that down, and so, like, for example, so again, he doesn't have to, I wouldn't say he's responsible for his fans, if he would say immediately knock it off, like this, but he basically never does that, like recently in a statement to, I want to say Ken Rosenthal, he had said that, like, I don't condone any bad behavior, but he never does it, while it's happening, Oh,
sounds like somebody who used to be in the White House. Sounds just like that person.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so it's very Trumpian. It's very it's a common way of internet bullying, that is like a little nuanced if you're not as online or as familiar with how these kind of conversations work, but it's the one that he traffics in. And so I say that, they always say, I apologize for the long preamble, but like the Mets are going after this man, like that is at least a rumor report, but he has, but all you have to do is Google Trevor Bauer harassment to find many different, times people have busted him on this. So like, so when I say, like, y'all, do you guys really care about this? Like, I think it's still a valid question because, here's this person with a more nuanced, but still very, offensive, I would argue misogynistic and dangerous, form of online abuse. And, and he's, the hottest free agent in the game or something like that. So, like, come on.
And that perfectly captures exactly why I don't want the Mets to sign him. Like, all of that you said right there. And I've been pretty vocal about this. Like, I've told Dexter about this. We've talked about this both on and off air. And I'm like, I just don't want this to happen for all of those reasons. And on top of that, like, he's just a dick. Like it just kind of seems like he's a dick. So I don't want to root for a dick. Period.
Yeah. Well, baseball has a lot to do with cleaning up their culture. Brad, thank you for joining us, man. You're doing a great job in terms of covering baseball and representing us, people of color, and talking about issues of race around baseball. We appreciate you, and we hope that you continue doing it, my brother. Appreciate you, man.
Sure.
Yo, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
One time for your mind, one time. One time for your mind, one time.
One time for your mind. We're back. We haven't talked in a couple of weeks, but we want to talk about what's been going on, what's changed in the country. Thankfully, 45 is up out of here, gone. Thank God, especially after the events that took place in the beginning of the month, Brian, where people stormed the Capitol and showed their privilege. I mean, I don't know about you, but black folks, we were just sitting back like, okay, yeah, we see you, because we know if that would have been us, we would have been shocked. That not being said, it's crazy with all what has gone on, but Joe Biden sworn in last week, officially, and Kamala Harris both sworn in officially. And I think for a lot of people, be like myself, no matter what your party affiliation is, I think it just feels good to have some competency back in the White House. I'm sure there's even some folks who tend to lean more Republican that were not for Trump that even feel this way. That there's just some competency back in the White House. But with everything that went on, all the lies telling people about an election's been stolen, and all this nonsense that we've been hearing, it's just nice. I don't know if it's exciting, I would say, because there's still a lot going on in the world. But for me, it's just a relief to actually see press conferences and a competent White House press secretary, and executive orders being passed and signed that aren't designed to harm people, and people, an administration that seems to actually want to get the country back on track. So I don't know about you, but that's just how I feel. So we're gonna wait and see, just like any other president. But it's nice to have that dude out of there for sure.
Yeah, somebody who appears to give a shit, somebody who appears to just be nice, somebody who appears to want to get certain things done. Now, we can quibble with the actual nuances of, certain things like, you know, things that should be more left leaning and whatever the case may be, and him being a moderate and all that stuff. But it's just nice to like have that, as you said. There's a point that I haven't heard anyone make, but like we've made a lot about the results, as in 81 million Biden, 74 million for Trump. And what I come to realize is that, like, yes, a lot of people are saying like that's a lot closer than you would have wanted it. Although we do have to remember that, especially in the case of Joe Biden, there were people that were voter suppressed. So he probably would have gotten even more votes because Georgia had to overcome his voter suppression, and other parts, like Texas and Nevada and Arizona, like there's some sneaky shit going on with some of the votes. Not in the way that Republicans think, but in a way that has actually, marginalized some other communities. So the vote tally could have been a lot more than that. And also, on top of that, like, regardless of whether or not the number would have been, whatever it would have been, but I also think that there are a lot of people who were dreamers, who were immigrants, who were not allowed to vote for whatever, American reason, that also would have voted for Biden too. So the lead would have been a lot longer, and I just think that nobody's pointing that out. I just wanted to get that out there on the front end. But yeah, it's nice to have somebody who's appears to be competent, somebody who's, boring. You know what I'm saying? Like, just
Boring is good sometimes, man. Boring is
right,
good.
right. You know what I mean? And we'll see, because there's articles of impeachment being written up by Republicans now. They're trying to find anything possible. Like, thank God, the Democrats got the Senate, because this could potentially be even more of a mess than it already is, or they're trying to make it be. But I do think gradually, like, for me, and a lot of people I've heard say this, like that was a day of hope, and then other people said, "Oh, racism isn't going away," and I don't think now is really a time to be pessimistic about anything. In terms of that, like we just need to like get shit started. He's already signing executive orders, trying to do stuff about COVID, trying to do stuff about like what we can get in terms of financial aid. Hopefully more than 1,400, because like 1,400 is just not going to cut it by itself. But and obviously, you hear things about he goes into the White House and he discovers that, oh, there was no coronavirus plan, so we're starting from ground zero. And it's like, yeah, we kind
It's
of knew
not
that,
really that shocking. Yeah, not
right?
really
And
that shocking.
at the same time, it's like we kind of knew that, but to also have it confirmed, it's kind of like, like, but
Well,
it is what it is at this point,
well, here's the
I
thing.
guess.
Like, I think you have to be optimistic about these things moving forward. But at the same time, when you look at the country, you look at the numbers, you look at the amount of people that voted for the guy who was last in office, and then you look at what happened on January 6th, there is cause for concern. And I think the people that feel the way that those people that stormed the Capitol building on January 6th, because of their privilege, and how they felt that they're untouchable by the law, and it was clear that they were untouchable by the law. As we know, as I said, if this was minorities, it doesn't go down that way. I think we know that. But when you see that happen, those people are still out there, and they still feel that way, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think what's very dangerous is there's still people that were around that refuse to denounce Trump for his actions in that, and how he incited those people to take those actions, and there were politicians to do that, and shame on them for having public office and inciting violence. Not cool at all whatsoever. So I think that's still out there, and I think that's the thing that people, especially people of color in this country, have to be mindful of. There's still people that don't want to see you do better, and that's very evident. Now they can hide it behind an election's been stolen and all this other stuff, but what's lying in the underbelly of that is racism, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon in this country. Quite frankly, because white people still have yet to acknowledge that it is a problem, and it has hurt people of color in this country, and it's set them back, and they've refused to do anything about it. So until that happens, we're still going to be dealing with that problem. So that's just it. Now, am I optimistic about what this administration can do? Absolutely. Look, anything's better than lack of competence. So coming in with some competence and actually a plan, I think that's encouraging. I think how they handle the virus going forward is going to have a huge impact on things we talk about in terms of sports and other things in this country, and people finally probably being able to get out and gather. So that's a huge thing. But we'll see. We're going to wait and see. We're not out the clear yet, but we'll wait and see. All right, that's it for this. That's it, you guys. You have something else you want to say?
Yeah, and the last thing I would really say about that is just I agree fundamentally what Bernie Sanders said, where it's like, look, yes, they're going to reach out to Republicans, they're going to try to see like if they can work together, whatever. But if the Republicans don't want to work together, then fuck them. We're just going to do it ourselves. And I think that's the thing. Like I thought Joe Biden gave his best speech at the inauguration. I also think that there's something to be said about like everybody preaching unity and things of that nature, which could be a word kind of like diversity, where we look at that and be like, all right, what do you really mean? But when it comes to unity, I think that, look, if there are people who genuinely want to work together, then yeah, you could achieve some sort of unity at some point. But if people are just going to be like Ted Cruz, then it's like, no, there's certain people in this world that you don't want to unify with.
It's
Period.
hard. It's hard to unify when people can't even get the facts straight on certain things, or are going to believe anything that anyone says. That it's hard to be unified with those folks if they're just going to ignore the facts.
There's no winning if you're trying to achieve a middle ground with assholes. That's basically what it comes down to. Like that's it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. All right, that's it for this one time for your mind. Kept it very political. That's also it for this episode 163 of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. We want to have a big thank you to our guest, Bradford Davis. Check out his work on the Daily News. Great stuff about Hank Aaron. Great stuff about the ridiculousness that was going around with the former GM of the New York Mets. We'll be continuing more throughout the month. The year is going on. We're almost a month through 2021, unbelievably already. We'll continue to roll on with more great content here on the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. So, for Brian Fonseca, I'm Dexter Henry. Until next time, y'all. Peace.